Welcome to B Shifter. It's John Vance here with Nick Bernasini and Terry Garrison. Good afternoon. We're recording this on St. Patrick's Day. It could come out a long time from now, but you're in green. Terry's not in green.
Oh, I have green on.
Oh yeah, green underwear.
Green socks.
Oh, green socks. I didn't do. I was not prepared for it.
It's like underwear for your feet.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you didn't ask me to prove it because I just lied. I don't have any green on. It was a lie. I went for it.
Is St. Patrick's Day a big thing in Phoenix? Do people get out and?
There used to be a couple bars that would get really crowded.
Yeah, but it was, it was the Irish guys.
Yeah.
Nah, we're more, our regional would be Cinco de Mayo, I think, is more of our,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Tequila.
Tequila, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we started rolling, we were talking about new chiefs. And you've been the new chief a few times. You've at least, not been a new chief, but you've been new to a position, Nick, and also you've started your own business in a lot of ways. So you've been new to that. Let's talk about advice to people who are making those career transitions, whether it's from captain to battalion chief to a deputy chief, new fire chief coming in from the outside. So let's start with the promotion. When people promote, that's a big change for them. And what advice would you give to newly promoted officers?
I think what people ought to know first is that we sit down here and have a cup of water and we go from green to you throw these questions out. It's not like we have any idea what you're going to ask us. And I'm sitting there looking at you thinking, you ask a lot of difficult questions. I haven't liked you for the last 3.5 minutes.
See? Yeah.
But no, but seriously, I want people to know that we don't study up on these. I mean, he just asked us right out of the blue. My favorite one was, in your neighborhood, on the street you live, what direction does the sun rise? And people would say, well, hold it, we live on 32nd, so it's south. And women would say stuff like that. Their husbands would just look at them and like, you married the right woman. She don't know north, south, east, west, sunrise, sunset. So we're stalling before we ask your question because it's a difficult question.
Well, we stalled to the point we don't even know what the question is anymore.
It had to do with, he said, let's start with promotions. That's what he did. So promotions, what do you think?
Well, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because, in the fire service, we talked about it last time, single level entry, you start as a firefighter, everybody has a chance to go up through the promotional process. And promotional obviously becomes very competitive inside the organization. Everybody kind of has to study together and get on. I think they form up in groups and teams. We did, right? And study with people, but at the end of the day, you're competing against each other. So just the process is kind of interesting in some organizations. I've been in organizations like Phoenix where I studied with guys, and then at the end of the day, it's like, I'm so happy you did good. I wish I would have done better. But you're kind of happy for each other. And I've been in organizations where, man, it is cutthroat when it comes to promotion. You can see the people that are studying and they're hiding their stuff. And I've had meetings where, as a fire chief, where I said, okay, we're going to have a captain's promotion, and I'm going to meet with you guys and answer any kind of questions you have. So you'll have 30, 40 people show up for a captain's promotional, and none of them say anything, because they don't want to give away whatever they have. They want to get there to see what I can give the entire group, but they don't want to give anybody else what they think is their inside stuff. Mm-hmm. That makes it kind of interesting. So just the competitive process. I think we got to talk about process before we talk about position, I guess.
It was kind of weird looking back on it. Like every time there was a test, it was almost like it was like a bodybuilding competition or some kind of a pageant. And you would have people, especially when I was a BC, is now because they're taking the captain's test, and so the whole thing's about the tactical. Is oh, if I score 100 on the tactical, it'd be great.
Yeah.
It's all I want. You think, yeah, okay, you scored 100 on the tactical, and you got a 72 on the test, and you're number 80 on the list.
Right.
Yeah, you got to do better on the other part to
All
get up.
parts.
But these cats would come in to see you, and they'd make these appointments, and they're killing themselves. They're all jacked up in it. And I remember one of them would bring gifts, and you're like, you can't buy me off with trinkets and shit, man. No, come on. I was going to give you this anyway because you're such a great chief. And you're like, yeah, no, tithing don't work for this, pal. You're giving it to the wrong guy.
Take it back.
This isn't going to happen.
It's inappropriate. But so when I just remember the first captain's test that I took, that was a big one. Paramedic was kind of interesting. That was early on in my career, and you even had to test for that. And they were selected 6 of us to go to paramedic school. I don't remember too much about that. That was 1979. But I remember my captain's promotional exam, the first one. And I wasn't going to take it. I had like 10 years on the job. It's like, I don't think I'm ready to be a captain. I was working at Station 11, where we love to work. And I was working with Warren Bryan, and he's a really smart guy, and he was taking the captain's test. So about maybe 3 to 4 weeks before the test, he goes, hey, Terry, you need to take it. I got all my notes here. And you take these, you read them, you're going to do really well. I said, oh, okay. So I did that. Worst thing I could have done, because I got enough to get past the written, but then I had to sit in an interview across from the chiefs, assistant chief of operations, and other chiefs. And when they started asking me questions, I realized I had no business. I was never so embarrassed. The very first question they asked me, it's like, oh my God, this wasn't written in his notes. So I apologized to him later. I came out number 55 on that out of about, I think, 80 people. And my nickname for the next 2 years was Speed Limit. And the funny thing about that is that the problem with promotion, not a problem, but just because of the way they work, if you don't take it, 2 years goes by before you get another chance. A lot of things happen in a couple of years. Nick would tell you the reason that we promoted kind of higher than what we thought we were going to is because of the other people that were taking the tests. And it's like, we ain't working for that guy, right? I mean, that had kind of a lot. It seems mean-spirited, but in truth, it's like, no, I don't want to work for that guy, so I need to test and make sure that I don't have to.
Yeah, I was never going to promote past captain. Once I made captain, I thought, I'm done. This is perfect. I've got my place. This is done. So it's almost like you're almost like the lord of an estate in feudal England, and think, okay, my shit's set. Well, the problem, like you said, is everybody's got a boss, and ours, we didn't always see eye to eye with. In fact, it became a thing where higher-ranking people would want certain individuals to promote who weren't going to promote, so their solution was to give them poor supervisors.
Yeah.
And so, and they would tell you that. They said, no, you need to be that person and not where you are if this is going to continue and get better. And finally, they whipped you into it. You thought, no, I can't take another one of these. If I continue to do this, it's going to have a negative effect on my career because I'm starting to behave poorly. And
you know what's interesting is you told me that for the first time, or at least I remember for the first time not long ago, that the guy who is in charge of where people went purposely put that guy around you, and I think I was there at the same time, to motivate you to promote.
Yeah.
That was actually brilliant, mean-spirited, and kind of, no, but it worked. It got you to promote.
Well, and I thanked them for it. At one point every day, because it was that was the best position I ever had, was being a battalion. It was better than being a bartender before I joined the fire department.
You didn't drink though.
No, not as a battalion chief.
Did you drink as a bartender?
Oh,
yeah. That would be every night you go and you.
No, I wouldn't drink every night, but there were times you had to drink to get through.
Okay.
In fact, I had a very speaking of this, it was kind of all upside down. Is because my father was a firefighter. I had a job at like 7 years old, right? All of our father firefighters, you're going to go to work, son. Your dad's kind of the same way.
Oh, yeah.
He owned a construction company, Okay, you quit shitting in your diaper. It's time to go to work and get some
This is the
shit.
handle side.
Yeah, come on, son, let's go. So that kind of started the whole thing. And then I always had a job. So one of the jobs I ended up with was I worked in a restaurant as a dishwasher when I was like 15 years old, 14, 15. Well, a fireman owned this restaurant because, you know, they're a cult. So you stay in the same cult. So as I evolved in that restaurant, I became, I worked in the kitchen as a dish up. And then I was about, I don't know, 17, 18 years old. And I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. And so instead of quitting, my boss said, well, you know, I need a bartender. And I said, well, I'll do. This, you know, get me out of the kitchen here where I can. So I was a bartender for a while before I became a firefighter. And the building next to our restaurant was the firefighters' union hall.
Yes, I remember well.
And on Tuesdays, they would have the executive board meetings, and we would stay open till midnight to accommodate the executive board of the union. So my dad's the fire chief. I'm not on the fire department, but I'm a bartender who's going to be a firefighter.
You're a 17-year-old with a beard, too.
Yeah, exactly. So I got an early start.
Yeah.
But so I had a unique relationship with many of the power positions on the fire, like the union president, as I had served him. I had killed many of his brain cells. The B shift commander, I had intimate knowledge of, and probably if forced to testify, could have put him in jail. So it was a unique relationship when I got hired on the fire department as a young firefighter because I knew and had fed many of these people's vices.
Yeah.
So it put me in a very unique position. Oh, you're the chief's kid. No, I was the union president's bartender and the shift commander's party guide. So be careful.
Because the chief didn't go to the bar.
No. Our fire chief had a 2-beer limit, and he said, when they open the second beer, I leave. And I thought, well, when I open the second beer, we just getting started.
I never saw him have one drink in his entire life.
No.
But so the promotional process becomes very competitive, and people go through that process. And in the systems that I worked in, by the time you get to that position where you're actually the captain or the engineer, the chief, you've done that for about 2 years.
Yeah.
In fact, you've taken a dozen interviews in different fire stations. Like, no, I'm not talking mock interviews. I'm talking people actually giving you situations where, what are you going to do about this? And you moved up as a fire captain, or you're moved up as a battalion chief. So by the time you get there, you feel like you're pretty ready for the job. You've done an internship for a couple of years. Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, before you actually get made, and payroll puts your new rank on your check, you're going to do at least a year or two.
And you've kind
moving
of
up.
And you've developed your personality in that role too, right?
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of like people switching, doing the old 180. That's who you are, is who you are throughout your kind of career. Now you may change some of your behavior based on your rank and position, but your personality pretty much stays consistent. Your personality didn't change, but you did different things, I would imagine.
Yeah, you kind of moderate yourself the further you get. Well, that just happens when you get older. You just start chilling more and doing less stupid stuff and thinking a little bit more about what you're going to do next. So, yeah, but I had 7 years on. I took the captain's test and acted as a captain, got made about a year later.
Okay.
But even then, it wasn't 3 or 4 years it took to really get comfortable. And I mean, were you really ever comfortable? And you just get better and better at the job.
Right.
And then I think you can be in it long enough where it starts to degrade at some point. If I would have stayed if I wouldn't have left my spot, it would have become a whole different thing.
Yeah.
As now it becomes mine, and it's. You have a different relationship with the crew, the area, the customer, the whole thing. It's like, well, you become more judgmental, I think, in the thing.
Yeah.
More set, you see less, your vision comes narrower. So promoting, going from captain to battalion chief, it's almost like you climbed up out of a hole and you could see the whole horizon finally. And then you really figure out kind of the role of the fire department as it services the community and what our role is. And it was, I don't know, I kind of liked it, is the frivolous stuff becomes less and less important, and the simpler, more basic stuff really becomes what drives it.
Yeah.
So like crews that would go out and actually do a good job and take care of one another and were people you wanted to be around were kind of the light and the driving force of the thing. And so we were very fortunate because that was the majority of it, is that during our careers there was, we talked about it yesterday, you know, now you got to moderate who's watching the news and what station. We didn't have that. It was like, no, we're all part of this. And that connected us a lot closer. So we weren't polarized. We couldn't go too far from the core because that was, see, that's like the customer service and the work becomes the pipe that we all, the hub that we revolve around.
But you're talking about the relationships too that you build along the way. That's the most critical part is you got to build relationships along the way. And you know, you pull people up with you. You find other people and you say, okay, you were a good firefighter, and man, I love your personality. You ought to take the captain's test. When you were at BC, how many people did you say, you know, you probably ought to you do that. This will be good for the organization. So you start thinking a little bit more about the organization and the value that some people have with the organization, and you want them to, I guess you start caring more about the organization. I shouldn't say more, but you look at it completely different and you start develop. I never liked the guys, and you remember them, I'm kind of jumping here a little bit, but when you start talking about relationships, is try to have a relationship with most everybody, right? And there's a small group of people that have these cliques that they move up through an organization. You know who they are. We never really had that.
No.
We try to be nice to everybody, right? But there were some people, they would get in these cliques and they would try to move up the organization as, it's almost like the, you know, the ants climbing each other up to get to the honey on the top of the tree. They would use each other and do that. And I think they had kind of an orchestrated plan how they do that. I never had a plan. I would just look at a guy and say, yeah, you ought to take the captain's test. And when you do, don't give me no gifts.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I remember, you know, you talk about one for all and all for one and that whole scene. And occasionally our fire chief would make the observation, is like, yeah, we're all crabs in a pot. And he says, we all stick together. And he said, so that means when you turn the heat on and the first crab's crawling out of the pot, the other one's pulling back down to this death. Yeah, that's who we are, son.
Yeah.
Well, you're kind of right. That's who we are. And
Yeah. The interesting thing about, so the promotional process, just to kind of keep it moving forward a little bit, is that it becomes competitive. There's winners and losers. If you're not careful with it, it'll disrupt the organization. People will have their feelings hurt. Not everybody gets to be number 1 through number 10. Not everybody gets made. So how you work through those hurt feelings is really important. It seems like the higher you go in the organization, the more their feelings get hurt. And we talked about the other day. So I would give, in Glendale, we would have, you know, maybe a dozen people take a battalion chief's test, and not everybody would do it very well. I would call those people first personally, like you said you did, and I'd say, hey, this is Garrison. Hey, just let you know, you didn't do very well. Even though I wasn't a part of the entire process, the process was delegated, and it's very fair, and I didn't want to be the person that selects somebody, you know. But at the end of the deal, I guess I got the final say. But really, I pretty much stuck to what they came up with, the forced ranking system that we have. But I would call the people low. And some of them were really hurt. Some of them were thankful that I called them. And a couple of them were mad. And they were mad at me. And it's like, okay, I'm going to give you a little time to not be mad at me. And there's some people who never quite get over it. But that's something with them, you know. I don't know how you help people like that.
I think it's really odd when I make those calls and people are so angry that they hang up on me.
You've had people hang up.
Oh
on
yeah. A couple of times, and being from a smaller organization, you kind of know it going in. Like, this person has changed their behavior, and inside you're calling them out on it, or the other chiefs see it. It's like, boy, you know, so-and-so sure has been nice lately. Have you noticed how, you know, they're actually completing their reports on time and delivering good customer service? And then when that process is over, boom, they're back to who they were before.
Or twice as low.
Yeah,
They
because now they're
twice.
mad. But you can't change who you are, right? I mean, you know throughout the process who's going to rise up to the top. It's a fair process that we have to, and tests and evaluations and everything else. You just kind of in your gut as a chief, when you're around long enough, you know who's going to perform well.
Yeah. I'm always surprised how quick the lists get out.
Well, and it's always interesting because there's always somebody that 180s. There's always that person who had a very colorful career as a firefighter and engineer, maybe even a captain, and then they promote to the next level and they wake up and they think, oh, I'm going to be a Nazi now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to change completely, and I'm going to expect this of everyone who works around me. And you're like, I don't know what you ate, but you need to reverse that somehow.
Yeah.
Well, when they call them Captain 180, that is...
I think probationary periods and promotions are very important, because if you get that, you need to have a conversation with that person, and it may not be where they finally end up.
Well, and a lot of those people, they'll start off and they'll take the test, and you see this, and you think, what are you doing? But they start making announcements. Oh, top 5, I for sure, without a doubt. They'll take the written, maybe top 3. And the list comes out and they're the bottom. And you're like, man, they are going to bash you like a piñata for the next couple months, Mr. Top 5.
Yeah, that's incredible. But when you get through that competitive process, and then you go for fire chief, now you're testing for fire chief. And so I go to Glendale, and I walk in, and we're the final 3 people for the fire chief position. One's an inside guy, one's a guy from back in the southeast. And when I walk in the room, I'd been the fire chief of Houston. I was still the fire chief of Houston. And I walk in there, and I knew the guy, the local guy, and I always thought he was a pretty pleasant guy. And they all look at each other, because they put us in a room together before the testing process, which is okay. So I said to them, and I hope they don't mind that I said it, but I said, hey guys, we're not competing against each other, man. Just remember, we are not competing. In fact, don't allow them, whoever them is, to have us look like we're competing against each other. I said that we're going to go in, and we're going to be who we're going to be and do the best we can. And then they're going to select whatever personality type the city manager, the elected officials, or the board, the fire board, want in the fire chief for the next couple of years. Because we're all qualified. We got to this point, right? And so it was real important for me to let them know that we're not competing, because don't feel uncomfortable around me. If I get selected or you get selected, I'm not going to be mad at you if you get selected. Good luck, right? So I think that's what happened. So I just got replaced in my organization. They selected a guy way different from me. That's the kind of fire chief they wanted right now. I wouldn't be mad if I competed against him and they hired him at the time. He would do whatever he did, but I did things different, because when I was hired by the last city manager, he was looking for a personality type. And we talk about that. Now I'm going to really go, is that everybody who's got a job and they were working somewhere in the Phoenix Fire Department, and they're fire chiefs today or have been fire chiefs, got that job because of Alan Brunacini and what he did organizationally, what he did across the country. And I think most of them know it. I hope they all know it. But I got every job I got because one of the first conversations or last I would have with people is, you work for Alan Brunacini, right? Yeah, I like that guy. He would get us in the door, and he got me in the door in every interview. I made the final on every interview, and it was on the shoulders of Alan Brunacini. And I think every fire chief has. And I've told you that before, and I'm not trying to be a suck up or anything. It is absolutely true that what he did for the American Fire Service, we capitalize on every day, I believe. Got quiet.
You know, I put in, I was never a fire chief. And I was getting ready to retire and do blue card or whatever. I had a couple things going on. And I thought, well, at this point, and it's almost like it falls to you at some point. You think, well, now it's time, I guess I have to put in for fire chief's job somewhere. So, Jesus Christ, what am I doing? So I thought, what the hell? I want to go, I'll move up the road a bit. So I put an application in. They were looking for a fire chief up north here. And so I put an application in. So you're doing the test, and they send you the packet for everything, and so they're getting all their candidates lined up. And so I got all my stuff done, and they had like 6 or 7 different packets they needed. So I filled them all out, and I get to the last one, and I thought, well, this is the same thing they wanted over here, so I just formatted it different, and a personal narrative or some bullshit, I don't remember. So I added a paragraph or something and then called it that and stapled together and sent it in. I was done. I thought, they said, don't bother us. We'll let you know when we're ready to let you know if you made the cut. And I didn't meet all the qualifications.
Right.
I hadn't finished my degree, and they said they preferred it, but you didn't have to have it. So anyway, I go back and forth over the phone with the personnel people. I don't hear anything for a couple weeks. All of a sudden, I get a random phone call, and she says, we're waiting, and we're holding this up an extra day for you to get me this last thing. And I said, well, I thought I had everything in. She says, no, you don't have this, da-da-da-da. And I said, well, I used this instead. She says, no, we don't accept that. It has to be its own separate thing. Yeah. And I said, okay, I apologize. I thought this would work. I said, what do you need? And she says, we need like at least 4 pages personal narrative of who you are.
4 pages.
I said, really? I said, can it be longer than 4 pages? She says, it can be as long as you want it to be. It's got to be at least 4 pages, though. I said, okay. Give me your address. I'll mail it to you. I can't send it electronically. Okay, here you go. So I sent her the B-Shifter book. I said, that's my personal narrative. I just shit. It's 4 pages.
Nicholas, you decided you didn't want that job.
Yeah.
I liked
You
it.
made the decision for him.
Well, I sent him the book. And, Terry, I'm still waiting to hear from him. I never heard back. Well, I have a friend who has a friend who works there, and there was like a quiet little group of B-shifters that was hoping to see what was going to happen if Nick Brunacini actually came in. And they said they found out I didn't make the cut to even apply for the interview part, and they got pissed off. And so they go to the whoever in the department, and they say, hey, God damn it. And it's and they told him what I did, and they said, oh, that moron. Oh, God, oh. And so they called and said, why did you? I said, hey, I didn't have 4 pages left, pal. It was the best for all of us.
And for them.
Yeah, exactly, without a doubt. And at the time, my father could not have been happier. He says, I don't see you working for a fire board, young man. He says, it would have been fun, but yeah.
Did you sign the book?
No.
That would have been great.
If they'd have hired me, I would have.
But fire chief, when you apply for a fire chief job, it's not a competition. Do you agree with that? You've been selected for fire chief. If you look at it like every other forced ranking promotional process you get, it's going to come out not. It just doesn't work that way. When they look for a fire chief, people are qualified, and then they pick a personality type that fits their agenda. And I don't think right now there's a whole lot of city managers that care too much about somebody's operational or leadership qualities. They're looking for people that can squeeze 2 nickels together and make a quarter.
Yeah, but I think there's even some of that in the fire department. I think like hiring firefighters, some of them are going to get hired because they're closer track and they know people. And then, but overall, it's kind of a crapshoot, the firefighters you hire. So you get them in the door, you train them, and then it's the same for officer. It's like you would look at a captain's list and you think, oh, there's some surprises here. Some people are lower than they should be, some people are higher. But it's like when we were going from district commanders to shift commanders in the fire department, every chief, every battalion chief, division chief, and deputy chief put in for those positions, right? So, I don't know, 40 people probably. Well, the senior staff knew who they were going to pick as shift commanders. They said because you're there. They know you. It's like, no, these people have the skill sets and the knowledge and the background and everything else to do these jobs. So they kind of set the interviews up to get what they want in the thing. And a lot of it, especially if it's an oral interview, it's vague enough. You can pick whoever the hell you want, and it'll stand the test of somebody grieving it or anything else. So they become. So really, it's kind of the organization has made the investments in these people,
Yeah.
and that's who you're going to put in those leadership roles, pretty much. And it always works better when the workforce kind of supports that too. Those become more authentic leaders in the thing. They did the work, they understand the work. The fire chief you keep talking about, his deal is. His to-do list was the first 4 or 5 years of his career as a firefighter. He says, we have to change these things. This is just at odds to being a service delivery organization that restores safety, yada, yada, yada. He says it looks more like the British Navy some days with the discipline and, my opinion of what's right and wrong and plantation ownership kind of things, like early stations where officers could just fire people summarily. Yeah. So I think that enlightenment and almost professionalizing the service is kind of what does it.
And personalizing it too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then you get what you put in. So, our biggest fear was that it was going to blow up. It can't get better. Is when that's your deal, you say, we can't make it any better. All we can do is screw it up. Well, then the thing becomes, no, we got to enforce the perimeter so we don't lose what we have. So it was an interesting evolution of starting as like a neophyte tadpole in a training academy and then swimming out the other end as a big-ass frog that made it through the thing. So, and that's good. I think, and you said it, we all start in the same place. Everybody begins in the academy. And every cult is the same way like that. And so it takes it past an organization into more of a cult where we're stronger than just a regular organization because we're laminated a little closer together through the work and the service and the rest of what we do.
What Terry said about are you competing against other chiefs? I think if you're getting hired from the outside, you're really not. They know what they're looking for, whether it's the guy who's going to come in or woman that's going to come in and cut everything, or go to 2-person staffing like we've talked about in the past, or it's a change agent type thing. When I got hired from the outside, my boss was cool, man. She told me, take your time. I don't expect a lot of change right away. We hired you because there's a direction we want the department to go in. But you don't have to get there overnight. Just change the stuff that needs to be changed right away. But take your time. And somebody else gave me some advice. When you're a brand new chief or new to any position, walk around with a pad of paper, and everything that you see and you're thinking of, you write it down, because so many chiefs are inclined to just make immediate changes. I don't like this. I'm going to make this change. I'm making changes 10 years later that I saw on the first 90 days. Like, this is the direction we should go in. But it's taken 9 or 10 years to get to the point where we can make some of those changes.
Go ahead.
Well, I just think it's a huge mistake when people come in from the outside and they want to throw everybody into the deep end of the pool.
Well, and it's interesting because the firefighters think you're going to do that. So when I went to Houston, they're like, okay, here comes a Phoenix guy, right? And I went to Bruno and I said, Bruno, we were having breakfast one day and I said, yeah, so one of the things that I'm hearing, I've just been there for a while, is that I'm going to make it, that I'm going to take everything from the Phoenix Fire Department, I'm going to lay it down on Houston. It's going to be like Phoenix East or whatever it would be, Phoenix South.
The Gulf of Phoenix.
Yeah. And I said, but I don't want to do that because it's a totally different personalities, different organization. The service that we deliver is the same, but it's like, and he says, what you should tell him, Terry? Tell him the Phoenix Fire Department is the best fire department they have in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Houston Fire Department ought to be the best fire department they have in Houston. Mm-hmm. You're not going to do that. And I use that line for months. And, I told people I wasn't going to say the F word while I was there. The first year, I tried not to say the F word, Phoenix. and that was my goal, So I tried not to compare Phoenix. So it was hard because 30 years in Phoenix, and that's what I knew. And I knew Alan Brunacini and everything that he stands for. That's what I stood for. So it was difficult not to say Phoenix, but I think I did a pretty good job of not doing that, and just showing people when you go to another department, and it's silly phrases you hear, but they really make sense. Where you say they don't care what you know till they know that you care. Everybody's heard that saying. Well, it's really true. They don't want to hear from you until they think you're part of their team and you actually give a shit about them and support what they are. And you got to understand what they are too. So just going in and making these big changes because they worked in your last organization, or making big changes because a politician or a city manager is telling you to do that, you're not a fire chief, you're a patsy. Mm-hmm. And so I think you got to get to know the people. Like you said, write it down, but also write some people's names down and try to get to know them. And it's hard in Houston, 4,200 firefighters at the time, but try to get to know the people the best you can. And I think that's what Bruno did, right? People said it's like I knew him. Well, I'm not very good at that, and I forget names, but I would try to listen to people when they talk. And I think new fire chiefs have any position, and that goes for a captain, a battalion chief, a shift commander, or whoever. Listen to the people that are now working for you, because they got really good ideas sometimes. And sometimes what they're telling you, even if they're mad or they're disgruntled, is good information to know that'll help you kind of support in your whole role. The whole purpose of being in that position is to support them, isn't it?
Yep.
It's the whole purpose.
You're really working for the firefighters. I mean, if you come in that servant leader type mentality, and you're there to serve the customers and make them safe, and I think I've talked to you guys about it. I've always had the mantra, we want this to be a great place to be a firefighter. So, we're safe, we're taking care of people, we're not letting them walk around with contaminated equipment and all that kind of stuff.
Well, Bruno said the best bosses are validated by their workers.
Yeah.
Not by your boss. Now, your boss, you want to make your boss happy, and that's usually what a good employee does. But you're really validated by the people that you're serving, right?
Yeah. Well, the common connection's the work. That's why we're there. Period.
And the city manager said, if you don't like firefighters or you don't appreciate fire, you got to appreciate the work they do.
Yeah.
How can you not appreciate the work that I do, the babies and all, all you could go as dramatic as you want to, because they're all true and they're all real stories. But how can you appreciate the work the firefighters do and not appreciate the people that are doing the work? I've never understood that to this day.
It's simple. It is, you said it. We had a boss who it was driven by the work. So it's customer service and the welfare of the workforce. And so you build this organization, you deliver service, you make improvements. Well, over the course of our careers, we worked in a system that had a response time of, 5 to 6 minutes. So the leadership of our department kept the department where it could deliver a certain level of service. And that was the fire chief who worked for the city, worked for the customer and the firefighter. You talk about fire chiefs who get the job, and no, I'm here and I work for the city manager. So I am the agent for whoever the authority having jurisdiction is. Well, there was a series of those supervisors in our former place, and you can see the effect that has had on the capability to deliver service. Is now we left, there was a 5-6 minute response time. Today, it's 9 to 10 minutes is what they're looking at. So the leadership of the department did not keep pace with the deployment requirements of the city. So, and that's just an example of where you put the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
That's more of an ego-based system than a operational-based system.
The other thing I want to say about the promotions and kind of how you move up and down in the rank, and not down. We're talking about moving up.
Maybe down.
Yeah, we've got people who've moved down voluntarily, some of them.
As boss, especially a new boss, be consistent, right? If you're an asshole, be a consistent asshole.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a hard ass, be a consistent hard ass. If you're a good guy, but the worst thing is when you're an employee and it's inconsistent. I always say that, bosses shouldn't surprise workers. Now, workers will surprise their bosses. They'll do some things that think, wow, I didn't know that was even possible. Are you going to be able to get that out of your ass? but it's you're going to cut that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Anyway, but
hey, these are things we have to manage. It stays in, damn it.
but it's like, I don't think bosses should surprise their employees too often. Consistency. We had a guy, jokingly, and we said it here before, say, whatever pill you're taking, tomorrow either take twice as much or half because you're screwed up today. But
You're
just
bouncing the wrong
be
way.
consistent as a boss. And if you're consistent as you move up through the ranks, which we are, Nick, you're pretty consistent throughout your entire life.
Pretty much.
And you just keep that all the way through. You don't have to surprise anybody. So when you're doing an interview or you're in an interview, just be yourself. Because if they promote you, especially as the fire chief, if you come in and you say, yes, city manager, I'll do that and do that and do that, with no intention. We know a guy that didn't get a fire chief job because the last question they asked him is, are you going to be able to cut our staffing to 3 persons? He's like, no. And they go, interview over. But that's the best thing that could happen for that guy.
They should have asked him that in the beginning, or they should have advertised it in the job description.
Right.
You're going from 4 to 3. If you're not interested, don't do it.
And there you go. That's
Yeah.
what they should have done. But it came at the end, and he's like, no, I'm not doing that. And he got up and walked out, and that's the way it went. But be consistent in your interview, and you should do that in captains. You should be yourself. Like you said, the people that do the 180 through the process, just hang on. What did Bruno used to say? Organizations are the way they are 2 weeks after event, the way they were 2 weeks before.
Yeah, if you want to see what's going to happen 2 weeks after a bad event, see what was happening 2 weeks before that event.
And I think that goes for people too.
Yeah.
After a promotional process,
Yeah.
they may change a little bit for the process, but get ready because as soon as they make that position, they're going to go back to that, whoever they are, good or bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So consistency, be yourself. Those are two of the main takeaways here.
Yeah.
And then
And do your job. Whatever your position is that's
play your
kind of
position.
yeah.
Don't promote to captain and then try to be the best firefighter on the crew.
Yeah.
that never works.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's a lot of people promoted to captain so they could get the nozzle. And you're like, well, no, that's not. You direct where the nozzle goes. You don't actually get to play open-y and closey with it anymore.
No,
There's
But
other people for that.
The other thing you take on promotions to take on more responsibility, not less. There's people that promote so they think they can put their feet up and not do shit.
Yeah.
No, you promote so you could take on more responsibility and impact more people, not the other way around.
Yeah, a friend of mine works at a department, and he said they got a new chief. It was an internal chief. And the guy came in and said, I've got 3.5 years. I'm not changing a thing. Don't ask me for anything. We're going to remain status quo. And then he was real paranoid. He thought everybody was out to get him his entire 3.5 years as chief. And it's like, why did you even promote to this? Because most people do it for the change, but he was doing it to pad the high five, obviously, and
Somebody
get a little more
should-
pension money.
A firecracker a day.
Yeah.
You'll never know who would.
But that's kind of what happened. As we promoted it, your job got more and more involved. There was more to it. It took longer. I mean, going from BC to shift commander was, it was more responsibility, and you had more shit you had to do.
You're responsible to more people, and you got to have less bad days.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes you're twitching. You're like, no, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And you think, well, you just got to. And then the other thing is you had the ability to improve the job. So
Yeah.
you got to reform it as once you got it.
That's
So one of the things we were doing at the end is we were doing all the strategic and tactical level training for the fire department, and we were really starting to revamp the ops manual. So the senior staff had given us a 4th deputy position out of the north, so we could rotate in and out of working the shift schedule. And then that person who was in the staff position took care of all the meetings, all the paperwork. So they did all the administrative backup stuff to keep the other 3 operational. And the plan was for us to rotate in and out of that. So we kind of thought, okay, we're going to run operations pretty much this way for the ops chief, and this is kind of what it looks like. So, but using that system is we started taking over more of the fire department. We ended up with the safety division back in operations, the training division back in operations. So all of that was, we were managing the whole bus from these shift commander positions, which were extremely robust. And to the point, and there was so much juice in those positions that when the fire chief retired, they basically gutted those positions because they had too much political power and influence over the entire workforce. And they said, nope, we're sunsetting you, and there's a new group that this is a political succession that you're going to live through. And we did. And you thought, okay, this is what it looks like. And, the people who took over, they took over, and that was their right to do it. It could piss us off all day long, and it did, but still, in fact, we talked about this at dinner last night. That's the reason the three of us are sitting here. Is because Alan Brunacini retired, and we thought we ain't doing this in our own fire department anymore. We'll just do it for all the fire departments, and I mean that's kind of what happened. That's where Blue Card came from.
Yeah.
You boys want to do a timeless tactical truth?
Hell yeah, we're
All
here.
right, let's do it. All right, timeless tactical truths from Alan Brunacini. We've got them in the cards. You can pick those up at the B-Shifter store, bshifter.com. And our randomly selected card today is the Three of Clubs.
Oh, that's nice.
Three of Clubs. If we miss the initial command window, we will never get that initial effectiveness opportunity back in some incidents. If we lose the front end, we lose the whole event. I hate it when that happens. If we miss the initial command window, we will never get that initial effectiveness opportunity back. In some incidents, if we lose the front end, we lose the whole event. I hate it when that happens.
Yeah. Oh, we get to jock operations.
Yep.
Hazard zone operations.
The initial operation is managed. It's the first four companies. That's the way it makes sense of this now. Led by a mobile IC typically. And what happens is the goal of that operation is to kill the fire, remove the fire, and when we put the fire out, we protect life and property. So that's when we take command in the very beginning of a structure fire. That's what it's for. And if and like the card says, if you miss that, then you don't get it with the reinforce because it went past the initial for whatever reason.
You don't get a lot of second chances at that. That old saying, you can't step in the same river twice.
Yeah, there's not a lot of three strikes with firefighting.
Everything's moving. And it's kind of interesting because other calls are like that too, right? You get some car accidents or some EMS calls or
people bleeding to death
and stuff where you got one chance on the front end and you need to make some really good decisions. And if you don't control that, or even incident scenes, if you don't control that incident scene on the front end, right? That's a whole deal with incident command is control and coordination and have a plan.
When you can't control the events, you got to control yourself.
Yeah.
To keep those incident hazards off of you. So
now those timeless tactical truths, they are timeless, right? But it's been a long time since I've seen the front end of a hazard zone not be controlled. Not be under control. I think we're doing that pretty well. I'm sure there's some places that read that and go, "Yep, that happens a lot in our area." But because of the strategic level and the way we manage the front end incidents in the valley here, I think we do pretty good.
Well, and that was all of that was put in place before the incident ever came in. As we trained on it, we did it, and then we would review incidents after they happened to confirm, we had this and we did this and we got the best outcome here. Yeah. So it's the system you build. So you put the system in place where you don't miss that front end, where you break it down that way and explain when you're training with your captains. No, it's the first four companies. Usually the first three engines and ladder truck get there. And the proof is in the pudding is 50% of the time. Half the incidents, working fires I responded to where I was the first arriving command officer, I did not transfer command in 50% of the instances because when I got there, they had an all clear and an under control there was nothing to take command of. So you leave it with them, and then you support them in different ways. But the incident's winding down and ain't ramping up yet.
You know, keep
Well,
going.
and that is the proof of the pudding on that card. Is half the time you don't even need to go to the next level because they did away with a major hazard before you could get there and jack it up.
I think that I agree with everything you said. I think the biggest problem on the front end of that, if you lose that opportunity, is because you didn't get the information necessary to identify those critical fireground factors. And I love, because I'm kind of back here again, and I love the 360. What's happening in the country is making sure that you get information around that entire structure. You know, in the police service, they say they take information and then they process it, and that becomes their intelligence, right? That's what we're doing now with Blue Card, is that you're making sure that you gather the appropriate information on the front end. And you just think back to fires that we heard throughout our entire career, like the Pang fire and other, where they didn't get information on the front end, that they didn't capture that front end the way they said, the way that card states, and then that had a devastating event on the back end. So I think if you capture that information, and then you use that to make your risk management, your strategic level decision, then your incident action plan, that's the key. And if you miss any of that, that's what that card is saying. You got to get all.
Well, there's two Southwest fires that fall into that, where you were, where the critical factors, major critical factors, didn't get discovered until it was too late, and they were they were unique of what happened, and it ended up causing death. But for us,
the critical incident factor killed our firefighters in both those incidents.
Yeah, it did.
And we didn't see what was happening above us both times. You know, I just thought we didn't see what was happening above us both times.
Concealed spaces.
The fire was moving at Southwest Supermarket, and the building was falling at Southwest Freeway.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't see that on the front end. So that's that capturing that information on the front end. So there's still departments that, we don't have time to do a 360, or we don't have time to give a good on-scene report. No, that's what that card is saying. You need to take the time to get that information, use your decision-making model that you guys have talked about forever, and capture that front end. Because if you don't, you're going to lose firefighters.
You got to start off right. And I think the initial effectiveness, like you said, it's even discretionary time activities as a fire chief. This might be your only opportunity to say something about something, or if you are going to say something, it's going to be most effective to say it right now instead of waiting a week to say something about an incident or whatever. And I get around, and in my county, I'd say probably 40% of the departments are using Blue Card. The rest are not, and you hear a huge difference. I mean, they have the beginning of that, or we're even going into incidents sometimes where our battalion chief is assuming command for a department that doesn't have a battalion chief or a chief on the scene. And if that initial radio report and the initial incident action plan really didn't line up to what they had, it's really difficult for that second IC to dig that out and start over again. I mean, it's almost like sometimes on an incident, you have to hit the reset button.
No.
Vance, imagine if like 60% of the fire departments around you just stopped doing EMS training. No, we've done it enough. Come on, how much CE do I need to learn how to take a blood pressure I've taken 10,000 times? Mm-hmm. We're not going to do it anymore. Okay, good luck.
Yeah. So that's a great timeless tactical truth. But I think so. You read those, and you read them, and they're first of all, they're entertaining, but you need to learn from them. And then on that one there, I think what Blue Card does with the 360, gathering information, looking at the critical fireground factors, teach your people fireground factors, right? Mm-hmm. That's one thing you got to do is organizations got to get better at driving around. And I know everybody's busy, but you got to talk about what critical fireground factors are. So when you see them, you know they're critical.
Yeah, we're doing it via pre-plans. I mean, getting the companies out, looking at the pre-plans, updating the pre-plans, and especially with a lot of construction going on, like we've talked about in the past.
I was screwing around the other day, and I ran across, I'm assembling the Timeless Tactical Truths Part 2. and there's, I don't know, we have thousands of them now.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting as you kind of watch the evolution of the guy who was writing them, my dad, and some of them have gotten darker and darker. And you're like, man, it's almost like murder mysteries.
He's like those painters when they go through their dark era.
Yeah, I did like Van Gogh taking his ear off, and I'm thinking,
He used to draw flowers.
yeah, exactly. What happened? He went from flowers to naked women to cutting his ear off and sending it to his lover.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, those are good fun.
Well, Nick and Terry, thanks, man.
Back at you, Vance.
Good having you guys here, and appreciate everybody listening to B Shifter. Until next time, talk to you later. Bye-bye.